Hey guys and welcome back. In this video we shall learn how to install Docker on Ubuntu. Now this Docker is a platform enabling users to package and run applications in containers, and these containers are isolated. They are very similar to virtual machines but are more portable and resource friendly. This isolation features allows for the execution of many containers simultaneously on a single host. Now there are two ways to install Docker on Ubuntu. The first is from the default Ubuntu repositories, which provides a very simple installation. Then the second way is from the official Docker repository. This ensures that you get the latest Docker version. So let's see how to install Docker from the default repositories of Ubuntu. So this is my Ubuntu operating system and I have opened up the terminal. The shortcut to open the terminal is Ctrl plus Alt plus T. And to begin with the installation, I'll suggest you to do an update to your system first. So for that, just type sudo space apt space update. This is going to update all the repositories of your computer. Then after that, we can install Docker. So just type sudo space apt space install space docker .io. Just hit enter and it's going to require additional 314 megabyte of space. So you can just type Y and hit enter and the download and installation of Docker will begin. And although the installation process is very straightforward and easy, the Docker package may be outdated, which means it might not install the latest version of Docker. But this is the easiest method, so I'm just showing this method. After that, we will see how to install from the Docker repositories, which will get us the latest version. Now after that, we have to install the dependencies, and to do that, I'm going to use Snap Package Manager. So just check whether Snap is installed on your computer or not. So you can type snap version and hit enter. If Snap is installed on your computer, then you will be able to see the version of Snap that is installed. If Snap is not installed on your computer, then you can just type sudo space apt space install space snapd. So you can use this command to install Snap on your computer. Snap is a package manager. So once Snap is installed on your computer, we can use Snap package manager to install the Docker repositories. So for that, just type sudo space snap space install space docker and hit enter. Now once the Docker dependency packages are installed, you will see a message like this, and after that you can check the installation to see whether Docker was properly installed or not. So you can use sudo space systemctl space status space docker. So from here you can observe that Docker is installed and it is actually running, and you can just hit Ctrl plus C to stop this process, and then after that you can check the version of Docker. So just type docker space hyphen version, and you can see the version that is installed is 20.10.21. So this was the version that was installed by the Ubuntu repositories. Now after that, let's see how we can install Docker from the official Docker repository. And before we can do that, I have to uninstall Docker, because before we can install Docker engine, we must first make sure that any conflicting packages are uninstalled. So I'm going to keep this command in the description of this video so you can directly copy it from there and then paste and run. Type Y and hit enter. Again hit Y and enter. So we have uninstalled Docker. After that, you can check the version of Docker, and it says no such file or directory because we have uninstalled Docker. Let me clear the terminal. Alright, now let's see how we can install Docker using the official Docker repository. Now the apt package manager requires a few prerequisite packages on the system. So we have to run this command to allow Ubuntu to access the Docker repositories over HTTPS, and it's going to allow apt to transfer files over HTTPS. Then it's going to allow the system to check security certificates, and we are also installing curl, which is a data transfer utility, and then we are adding script for software management. So you can just hit enter. Then after that we have to add a GPG key which verifies the authenticity of a software package. So I'll just add the command here, and all these commands are in the description of the video, so you can directly copy them from the description and you don't have to type them. And hit enter. You will get a message like this, which is okay. After that we have to add Docker repository, and this command adds the official Docker repository and updates the package database with the latest Docker packages. And here we just have to press enter to continue. Alright, now once it is complete, we can specify installation source, and to do that we will have to execute the apt-cache command. So let's type apt-cache space policy space docker-ce and hit enter, and you can see still it's showing installed none, and candidate is this one which states the version which is the latest in the added source. And then finally we can just install Docker. To do that, just type sudo space apt space install space docker -ce and hit enter. Type y and hit enter. Then just wait for the installation process to complete. Let's clear this screen, and now let's check the status. So I'll type sudo space systemctl space status docker and hit enter, and from here the output states that the Docker daemon is up and running. You can see it from here. Then we can just hit Ctrl+C to stop it, and also if you want you can check the version of Docker. So just type docker space --version, and the version that is installed is 24.0.2, and if you remember when we used the Ubuntu repositories, the version that was installed was 20.10. so this is the latest version. So that's all for the installation part. If you want to see how to use Docker, then I'll just quickly give you a brief introduction. Now to use Docker, we just have to use the docker command. Just type docker and hit enter. Now this provides all Docker information, including the syntax, options and commands, which is available by Docker. So you can have a look from here. Now these are the commands that you can use. These are the management commands, these are the common commands, then these are the options. Now you can start using Docker by downloading Docker images, and then you can create containers and manage Docker volumes. Now let's work with Docker images, and Docker images are the base for building Docker containers. The images are located on Docker Hub, which is a Docker repository. The repository allows all users to host their images on Docker Hub, resulting in many images to choose from, including applications and Linux distributions. So let's search for Docker images, and to do that we have to write sudo space docker space search and then space, we have to give a keyword, and keyword specifies what you want to search. For example, if you want to search for all the Ubuntu images, you can just type Ubuntu and hit enter. And also you can notice that I have used sudo command here because docker commands can only be run with the prefix sudo. And you can see all the Ubuntu images on the Docker repository. And also if you notice that we have a column here which is official, and if under official it's written OK, then it means the image, like for example this image, was uploaded by the official company that developed the project. So this must have been uploaded by Canonical. Now after deciding which image you want, we can download it using the pull option. So to pull, we have to write sudo space docker space pull, and then we have to write the name of the image. For example, let's say I want to pull this image which is Ubuntu, so I'll just write Ubuntu and hit enter. Now after this image is downloaded, you can use it to spin up a container. So there are two ways: either you can download the image and then spin up a container, or the other way is by creating a container from an image that has not been downloaded yet, which in turn is going to cause Docker to download the image first and then create the container. So there are two ways to do that. So there are two ways to create the container. And then if you want to see the images that you have downloaded, you can type sudo space docker space images and hit enter, and this is the image that I have downloaded, so that's why it's visible here. Let me clear the screen from here. Alright, now let's see how we can work with the Docker containers. A Docker container is an isolated virtual environment created from a Docker image. So you can use an image you have previously downloaded or specify its name in the docker run command, and then the Docker is going to automatically download the image and create a container. So let's create a hello world image. So for that, just type sudo space docker space run space hello hyphen world. Now this is going to download a test image of hello world image and spin up a container. So just run the command, and you can see that first of all it tried to search the image on the computer on the local machine, but it was not able to find it. Then it started pulling it from the Docker repository. So it has downloaded the image from the repository, and after the pull was complete, the image was used to spin up a container. And after the creation hello from Docker, this message appears along with the explanation of how the container works, and then Docker shuts it down. So you can read it from here. The Docker client contacted the Docker daemon. The Docker daemon pulled the hello world image from the Docker hub. The Docker daemon created a new container from that image which runs the executable that produces the output you are currently reading. The Docker daemon streamed that output to the Docker client, which sent it to your terminal. Now after that, let's see how we can run a Docker container. To do that, we just have to type sudo space docker space run, then space. After that, we have to write the name of the image. In case you have already created a container, then you can write the name of the image here. Otherwise, if you have not created one and you want to create a new container, then you can use here hyphen name and then space, and then give a new name to your container. Let's say you want to give the name as test container, and then after that you will have to write the name of the image that you have pulled. This is how you can create a new container with this test container name. But let's try to do something simple. I will just run the Ubuntu image that we have downloaded earlier. So I'll just hit enter. Now the command creates a container from the specified image of Ubuntu, but it is in non-interactive mode. Now to obtain interactive shell access to the container, we have to specify -i and -t switches. For example, I'll use the same command, and here I'll just add -it. So we are using two switches, I and T, and then hit enter. Now you can see the terminal has changed, stating that it is operating within the container. So it states that it is operating within the container that we have run just now, and we can identify it by the container ID, which is this one. This is the ID of the container, and you can use this container ID to remove, start or stop the container. Now after running the container in interactive mode, you can pass any command normally to interact with the system. Also the access is root, so there is no need for sudo. So you don't have to type sudo if you want to interact with your container. And any changes made inside the container apply only to that container. And once you are done with interacting with your container, you can exit the container by using the exit command like this. Now the next thing that you can do is to view the Docker containers. An active Docker container is a container that is currently running, and listing containers is useful as it outputs the unique ID and the name required when starting, stopping or removing a container. So to do that, we just have to type sudo space docker space ps and hit enter. So this command outputs a list of active containers, and as you can see from here also, we don't have any active container. All of them have been shut down. They still exist in the system, but they are not running. Now to list all the containers including the inactive ones, we have to add here -a flag and then hit enter. And then after that you can see we have 3 containers, and you can also see the other details of your container like the container ID, the name of the image, the command, then creation time, the current status, ports if they are using any, and the unique name. Alternatively, if you want to show only the latest container, then you can do that by passing -l flag. So this is the latest container Ubuntu. Now let's see how we can start a Docker container. Now to start a stopped container, we can use the docker start command, which means the Docker is already created and it's already in the system, but it's not running. So we just have to start it, and to do that we have to type sudo space docker space start and then space, and then we have to give the container ID. Let's say I want to run this Docker. So I will just copy the container ID from here and I'll paste it. And then after that we can just hit enter. So there are two ways: either you can give the container ID, or instead of that you can give the container name, which is this name. So you can give either of these two and then hit enter, and then it's going to start your Docker. Now to stop the Docker, we just have to use the stop command. So sudo space docker space stop, and here also we have to either use the Docker ID or the container ID, or we can just use the container name. So I'll just use the container name and hit enter, and the container has been stopped. If you want to check the current running containers, you can do that from here. You just have to use this command sudo docker space ps and hit enter, and you can see none of the containers are active. Now the next thing that you can do on your Docker is remove a Docker container. So you can remove the unnecessary containers using the rm command. For that we have to use sudo space docker space rm, and then after that we have to give either the name or the container ID. So let's say I want to remove this container, so I can just copy the container ID from here and I'll paste the container ID here, and then I'll just hit enter and the container will be removed. Now let's check if the container is removed or not. And to display the list of all the containers, whether they are active or inactive, we have to add -a flag. So don't forget that, and hit enter. And now you can see the container has been removed. The container with this ID, which starts with F24, is removed. So that's how we can delete a container. Then finally, the last thing to know about Docker is Docker volumes. A Docker volume is a file system mechanism which allows users to preserve data which is generated and used by Docker containers. So currently what we have is Docker containers. If we run these containers, they are going to run and they are going to return the output according to the input that you provide, but they are not preserving any data. Once you stop them, everything will be deleted. Now if you want to preserve the data of the containers, you will have to use a file system. Just like in computers, we have RAM and we have hard disk. Now to save the data that is generated by our computer, we need a hard disk, whether it's a solid state drive or a hard disk drive. In the same way with Docker, we need to use the Docker volumes so that we can save the data. Now also you can use Docker volumes for databases or other stateful applications. Since the volumes are stored on the host, they don't depend on the container, but they allow for easy data backups as well as sharing between multiple containers. Now let's see how we can create a Docker volume. To do that, we simply have to type sudo space docker space volume, then space create, since we are creating a volume, and then we have to give a name to our volume. Let's say I will give example volume and then hit enter. So example volume is created, and then to remove this volume we have to type sudo space docker space volume, then space rm to remove, and then we have to give the name of the volume. So I'll just copy it from here, then paste it here, and then hit enter, and the volume is deleted. So that's all for Docker. In this video we have seen how to install Docker using the Ubuntu repositories as well as the official Docker repositories, and then we saw a quick introduction of Docker. What is a Docker, what is a image, how to pull an image. Then we talked about the Docker containers, how to create a container, how to run and stop as well as remove a container. Then after that, finally we saw how to create a volume and then delete a volume. So that's all for the introduction part. I hope you learned something new today. So if you like the video, don't forget to give a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel. I'm going to see you in the next video. Thanks for watching.